Come and have fun with Drupal.
Hi, welcome back to Drupal Fever. This is another step in our series created to help you set up a Drupal development environment on your computer. Let's bring back our list of primary requirements. We have already covered the process to install VirtualBox. We also went over the steps to install CentOS in our virtual machine. Now we are going to install Apache on CentOS. If you have been following this series, you may have already noticed that I usually give a little introduction before getting to the practical phase of the lesson. This lesson will be no different. I decided to make a quick overview on the history of web service in general. We are going to start at the very beginning. In my opinion, Tim Berners-Lee didn't get the media attention that he deserves. He is the father of the World Wide Web. Did you know that? In 1989, he was working as a physicist for CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research. Back then, he proposed to his employers an internet system that would facilitate the sharing of information between scientists and universities. A year later, on Christmas Day 1990, the first World Wide Web server went live. It was no doubt one of the greatest gifts to modern society. The first web server was called CERN HTTPD. HTTPD stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol Daemon. By the way, daemon is spelled D-A-E-M-O-N, and it stands for Disk and Execution Monitor. It is like a background process designed to perform administrative tasks or monitor services. That's exactly what a web server does. On August 1991, embracing the true spirit of the open source movement, Berners-Lee made the source code for the CERN HTTPD server available to the general public. A couple of months after running the first web server, Berners-Lee made public the first guidelines for writing HTML, which stands for Hypertext Markup Language. HTML is the basic language for the World Wide Web. At the beginning, the World Wide Web didn't catch on at all. By the end of 1992, there were only 50 websites available on the entire world. At the beginning of 1993, a group of guys from NCSA, the National Center for Supercomputing Applications at the University of Illinois, made history as they tinkered with Berners-Lee's original ideas and created the first graphical web browser called Mosaic. Rob McCall was in charge of developing their own web server, which was called NCSA HTTPD. With the same spirit of Berners-Lee, Mosaic was open source, and it became hugely popular, and the NCSA HTTPD web server was widely adopted. However, Mark Andreessen and the guys from the University of Illinois decided to open their startup company and sell a commercial version of their web browser. The browser was called Netscape, and their commercial version of the original NCSA HTTPD web server was called Netscape enterprise server. Right around this time, the folks from Microsoft decided to tackle Netscape's dominance head-on. They launched their own web browser called Internet Explorer, and at the end of 1994, they released their web server called Internet Information Server, or IIS for short. Microsoft offered IIS as a free software which came bundled with Windows NT 3.51. That move from Microsoft really killed any chances of commercial success from the Netscape web server, which was eventually sold to Sun Microsystems. Microsoft remains strong as the second most used web server in the world. Earlier on, in the same year 1995, most of the web was still using the NCSA HTTPD web server from Rob McCall. It was then the dominant open source web server. However, Rob McCall was no longer working at the Illinois University, and the web server project was kind of abandoned to its fate. With no one in charge of further development of the NCSA HTTPD web server, a group of webmasters with Brian Behlendorf being one of their most vocal promoters, decided to start another project that would continue the development of the NCSA web server. Each webmaster from this small group was already working on their own to patch and improve the original NCSA HTTPD server. They combined forces and ended up with a project that was much better than their individual versions. This new and improved product was released as an open source web server. The new project was named Apache. The Apache server was the de facto successor to the NCSA HTTPD web server, and virtually everyone moved to the new web server. Since then, the Apache web server has been a dominant force with popularity that has never been challenged, and at times growing to more than 3 times the popularity of its closest competitor. I could end this little history overview right now, but I have to tell you that there is a new web server on the horizon that is promising to be a force to be reckoned with, and we all have Igor Sisoev to thank for. He is a brilliant programmer from Russia who came up with this new revolutionary web server. He started this project in 2002 and publicly released its source code on October 2004. The secret behind the Nginx web server's amazing performance is in that it has an event-driven architecture as opposed to Apache and other web servers, which are process-based servers. This makes the Nginx web server a great candidate for static content. If that's what you have in your website, Nginx can outperform Apache up to 15 times over while using a fraction of the server's memory. Some of today's biggest names using Nginx are Pinterest.com, Tumblr.com, About.com, Vimeo.com, among others. So now you may be asking yourself, why waste time learning Apache? Why not go straight to Nginx, right? What is the downside to using Nginx now? Nginx is a web server that hasn't reached the maturity of the more established web servers. Installing Nginx on your CentOS box is still a very complex proposition. You will also have to struggle with Drupal to have it properly running on Nginx. My advice is to wait a year or so before attempting a web server transition. Let the experts out there pave the way. Nginx, however, is a project for you to keep an eye on. Some analysts predict that it will be the successor to Apache, in the same way Apache was the successor to the NCSA HTTPD web server. Time will tell. Now that you have an idea about the current state of the web server war for supremacy, it's time to get your feet wet. We're going to start by changing yet a few more settings on the VirtualBox console. Let's open it. Now go to Settings on your CentOS 6 virtual machine. Go to Advanced, and we're going to change the Shared Clipboard option, which is set as disabled, and change it to bidirectional. We are also changing the option Drag and Drop, which is disabled, and set it to bidirectional as well. And one last thing. There is a mini toolbar feature that only shows up when you toggle your virtual machine to full screen. When you move the mouse to the bottom of the screen, this mini toolbar pops up. This thing drives me crazy, so I am disabling it by unselecting this checkbox. If you like it, just leave it there. I personally don't like it. So now let's close this and start CentOS. Before installing Apache, we'll make a couple of interface changes on CentOS that I'm sure will drive the Linux people nuts. In my defense, I have to say that the focus of this series is to help mostly Windows users to lose their fear of Linux. These interface changes on CentOS are going to, I hope, make the transition from Windows a little less frustrating and unfamiliar. We will start by unlocking the bottom panel. Now we will drag the Windows list gadget to the top. I don't know if you guys can see it, but there is a handle which looks like two parallel lines of light gray dots. Now we are going to change a couple of settings on our clock. The clock gadget has several cool features, but it takes a lot of real estate on our taskbar. So we need to right-click and select Preferences here. Now we will unselect the Show Temperature and the Show Weather checkboxes. Here is a place where you can change the time from military style to the 12 hours system. Now we close here. So now let's drag the panel handle here to the right and open some space here. Now I just want to say that this bottom thing here allows you to switch between desktops. I never used it in my life. In my opinion, this thing just takes up space on your taskbar. And also having the recycle bin on the taskbar is another useless thing, so I'm going to get rid of the whole bottom panel. You do that by right-clicking on it and selecting Delete this panel. Confirm to delete. Okay, so now we're going to the Properties on the top panel and go to the Orientation drop down and select from top to bottom. Now close it. Now it's looking a little more like Windows. One thing you may have already noticed is that the settings windows we open here on Linux don't have an OK and a cancel button. This can be a little disconcerting at first for Windows users. Whatever change you make will take immediate effect. You don't have to click an OK button. Well, there is a drawback to this. If you, for any reason, decided that you don't like the change you just made on a panel, you will have to change it back to the way it was by hand since there is no cancel button. Now we are going to add another gadget to the taskbar. You do that by right-clicking on the panel and selecting Add to Panel. We need to go down here and select Main Menu and click on the Add button. Now this little CentOS flower appears here. This main menu is the equivalent to the Windows Start button. So now let's move it to the left corner, just like the Start button. Oops, I can't move it here because it looks like something is locked. Okay, so let's move the menu bar then. Better. Now I can move the main menu to the left. Still not moving. Okay. Oh, it's locked. So we need to unlock it. Right click and move. Let's unlock the email icon. Well, let's just remove from panel. I don't really need it. Now let's unlock the notepad icon. Well, let's get rid of this one as well. So I can finally move my main menu to the corner. This is going to be now my Start button. So now let me move this one a little closer. Let's save some space. So now I feel like it's safe to get rid of this menu bar since the main menu is already set to replace it. Just right-click and select Remove from Panel. Okay, close this. I'm not finished yet. I think I'm going to install Thunderbird. Thunderbird is my favorite email software from the Mozilla guys. What I like the most about this software is that it is cross-platform. The same interface that I use inside Linux will be the same on Windows or Mac. Besides, it has some neat features that are unique to this application. For example, it synchronizes between installations. If you read an email in the office, this email will be marked as read at home. An email filter you created in the office will be automatically created at home. Pretty cool stuff. So let's get on to it. We need to open a terminal and type su -- and press enter to switch to the root user on the terminal window. By the way, SU stands for super user. Root is the Linux super user, which is the equivalent to the administrator user in Windows. Now we type the root password and press enter. Now I'm going to type yum install Thunderbird to install the Mozilla Thunderbird email software. Let me type yes here. So now that the installation is finished, let me go through the menu and here it is. Now I need to drag the icon to my taskbar. Now I need to move it as close as possible to the other icons. Okay. Also, I want to have easy access to my Linux favorite text editor. The Gnode text editor icon was on our taskbar, but now I will drag the shortcut for the gedit text editor. I like this one better. Now I want to drag the icon as close as possible to the left. Finally, I will drag the shortcut for the terminal. Let's put it here. Now move it closer. No, I think, yeah, here will be better. Now I'm going to make up some space for the open applications. Well, I think I'm going to make one last change to the clock because it is still taking up too much real estate on our taskbar. Let me just get rid of the date. Okay, close. Okay, let's just drag it. I gained a little more room here. What is this? Well, it vanished. Okay, one last thing to change is this user menu. I don't really need that since I can have access to the same options through the Start button. Let me drag it a little further here. Yeah, I made a lot of space. It looks pretty much like Windows. So now let's just close this and start the terminal again with our new taskbar shortcut. Let me drag it to the corner. And finally, we're going to install Apache. Let's log back in as root on the terminal by typing superuser space dash. Now enter. Now it's time for the root password. Now we need to use yum to install Apache. For this, we will need to type yum space -y space install space httpd. The -y is to answer yes to any prompt during the installation. And httpd is how Apache is called in CentOS. Enter. Yum is saying that httpd was not installed. Yum is also giving a reason why. It is saying that Apache is already installed on CentOS. When we chose the option Desktop during the CentOS installation, the installer included a few applications deemed useful to the desktop user. One of these applications is Apache. Also, yum is saying that we have the latest version, so there is no need to update it. Since we don't need to install it, let's check if it is running already. We do that by typing service space httpd space status. Yep. httpd is stopped, meaning it's not running. Well, that's easy to fix. Let me press the up arrow on my keyboard to bring back the last command I typed. Now I need to edit this command and change the word status to start. Enter. It is now saying that Apache started OK. Now we will be using a text editor that runs from the terminal. This text editor is called Nano. Now type Nano. There is another text editor for the terminal called VI. VI is harder to use, but in many situations it will be the only option available, so it's very important that we know our way around it. I will make a more detailed video on VI and Nano in the near future. But for now, just pay attention and you should be able to follow along. We're going to be using Nano here to edit the Apache configuration file. The Apache configuration file is located at /etc/httpd/conf/ht press tab tpd.conf. Enter. We are now inside Nano. Well, we are still inside the terminal, but now Nano is handling our input. Nano doesn't give support for the mouse, but you can go up and down on this open text file by using the keyboard arrows. You can also use the page up and the page down keys on your keyboard. Yes, your keyboard has the page up and the page down keys. I'm sure most of you never use these keys, but they are there next to the delete key and the home and end keys. I'm sure you never use the home and end keys either. So that's how you navigate through the file. Now, at the bottom here, Nano has like a cheat sheet with the most used shortcuts. If, for example, you press Ctrl W, you will bring up the search prompt. This Apache configuration file is very big, so we're going to use this search tool all the time. It's much more convenient than having to slowly go up and down using the keyboard arrows. That's exactly what we are going to do now. We're going to search for the string server name. Remember, most things on Linux are case sensitive, so pay attention to this. Enter. Yes, it found the first instance of the server name string. If you want to find the next occurrence of the searched string, you need to use the same key combination, Ctrl W, and press Enter without typing anything. That's where I wanted to get to. We're going to create a new line after this one and write the following. Server name. And now I'm going to type my domain name here, but you should type your domain name instead. If you decide to use a different name for your website here on the development environment, you will have problems with your database when the time comes to publish your website. I'm typing drupalfever.com here, but you should type your domain name, including the .com, .net, or .org accordingly. We still need to edit something else on the same file, so we need to use the same key combination, Ctrl W, to bring back the search prompt. We need to type the following. Open angle bracket, directory, space, between quotes, /var/www/ HTML. Now close the angle bracket here. Enter. In fact, I'm not looking for this line. I'm looking for something that comes after this line. The problem is that the string that I'm actually looking for here appeared several times in this file. However, I only need to edit the string that occurs after the string that I just searched for here. I'm looking for the string allow override none. Let's go down the file. Here it is. Now we need to change it from none to all. Now we need to save this configuration file and get out of Nano. To do that, we need to use the write out key combination, which is Ctrl O. Press Enter to confirm the write out command. Now we need to exit Nano. To exit, we use the key combination Ctrl X. So we are back to our terminal. We just closed Nano and are ready to continue. Now we need to tell Apache that there was a change on the configuration file. We do that by typing service space httpd space restart. If I press enter here, Apache will close all open sessions on our web server and restart. That may be okay on our development environment, but could be very annoying to your users on a production web server. So let's just keep following good practices, and instead of restart, we should type reload here. Looks like it did. Now we need to make sure that the HTTPD server is running when you start the computer. I do that by using the command chkconfig or checkconfig space httpd space on. Press enter. Now to make sure that everything is okay, we need to type the following: checkconfig or chkconfig space -- list space httpd. Enter. As it shows here, Apache will run on levels 2, 3, 4, and 5. This levels thing just means that Apache will run on several situations on the server. For example, if Linux has just started and no one has logged in yet, Apache will be already running. If, on the other hand, there is a group of people already using Linux, Apache will also be running on the background. Each level represents a Linux running state. So Apache will be running on most situations. Now we need to change the firewall configuration. For this, we need to type system-config-firewall. Since we are logged in on a CentOS desktop, it will bring up the firewall configuration window. If, however, we were connected to a server through a terminal only, we would see a terminal version of this tool. The terminal version is pretty easy to use. It is more or less the same as this window. Let's close this warning. What we need to do here is to open port 80 for TCP so we can access our web server from the outside. We should also open port 443 for TCP. This will allow us to establish a HTTPS connection on our development environment. We will open more ports in the future, but this is it for now. Now we need to click on the Apply button and click on the Yes button. Now we can close this firewall tool. Finally, we need to edit the hosts file. Let's clear the screen. Now, using nano again, we're going to edit the /etc/hosts file. The name of the file is just hosts without any extension. Press enter. This file has a bunch of stuff here. Don't mess with it. Just go to the end of the file and type the following: 127.0.0.1 drupalfever.com. Remember, here you will type your own domain name. That's it. So now we need to write out. We need to press Ctrl O. Enter to save the file. Now we need to exit nano by pressing Ctrl X. That's it. Now what we need to do is see if everything is working. We do that by opening a browser window and typing localhost on the address bar. Enter. There you go. Apache 2 test page is up and running. So now we need to see if the changes we just made on the hosts file are also working. We can do that by typing our domain name on the address bar and pressing enter. Great! It is showing the same Apache 2 test page, and that's how it is supposed to work at the moment. That's it for now. I did what I set out to do on this video. Let's close the browser window and exit from our terminal. On our next video, we're going to talk about how to enable PHP on Apache. I've been doing these videos on my spare time, so you guys must be patient. I hope to finish my next video on the next few weeks. Subscribe to my channel to be informed about new videos. This is Elias Barbosa from Drupal Fever, and I'll see you next time.